Hey guys, how are you doing? My name is Dr. Jake Dodds, and today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit more about posture, structure, and even more importantly, how do you move once you get to those good positions. So the reason we care about this, and if you haven't heard my backstory, is I played college soccer. I ended up having kind of a weird neurologic event where I couldn't walk, couldn't talk, kind of passed out. So I had this big event, didn't know why, went to the Mayo Clinic, went to every doctor imaginable, ended up at a chiropractor's office. So he took my x-rays and 30 minutes after I got there, he was showing me, he was like, hey Jake, your head's supposed to be like this. Your head's actually like this. So I had a complete reverse cervical curvature. I've talked about why that's important in a couple past videos, so if you're interested in digging more into that, go ahead and check it out. But it was that moment that this really hit me of hey, our body's actually supposed to be in this certain position, and if it's not there, it really starts to stress stuff out, whether that's muscles, whether that's nerves, whether that's blood flow. The health of our body is really dependent on the position that it can exist in. So we kind of hear posture, 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 and it's usually related to kind of an aesthetic thing or just holding yourself well. But it goes so much deeper than that. It really is a foundational layer of our health. Now, once I had this realization, obviously I was really excited about, hey, how do I actually get to a better position? Because what I found for myself is with chiropractic, the joint position is super important, and that's what chiropractors do, is they make sure the spine's in good alignment and the head's over the spine. So what I was finding is I had this kind of misalignment going on. So chiropractic was really good for me to get back to a good center position. From this side view though, I was still really struggling of hey, how do I get back to vertical? Because I still really have this pattern of this. And a question I get is why am I always like this? Why does my body default here? And the shorter answer is we're not very kind to our spines throughout our lives, right? Most of us, and for myself, I was in school at that time, just hours and hours a day right here. Go home and do homework. Like I mentioned, I was very active in soccer, and same thing. I just had all this repetition in one position, and everything was very forward and hunched forward for me. And then just throughout my life, I've had various concussions, and usually that's the case for people. Is we have this day-to-day stress, and then these big things that settle in for us. Also, and it all gets layered on top of each other. Another thing that I kind of learned later down the line is I was pretty stressed at that point in my life, just bouncing out of hospitals, not really knowing what was going on with me. So something I learned after the fact is when your body is stressed, if you feel stressed on a consistent basis, the front muscles of your body turn on harder than the back. So essentially it puts you in this locked defensive position. But again, neurologically, your brain can actually kind of force you into this forward posture if you're not, if you are stressed on a consistent basis. So I was all excited about changing it. Chiropractic was helping me in one direction. I was having a hard time verticalizing more. So I started doing some research, and what I was told is what a lot of people are told is first thing, go ahead and try yoga. You're tight, you got to open things up. And nothing against yoga other than it's just such a blanket coverall for people that are told hey, just go do yoga, it's going to take care of your posture. Do yoga, you'll have great posture. And I actually strongly disagree with that, and we'll talk more about that in a second, but I was doing yoga 4 times a week. I could put my palms on the floor. In some respects I was more flexible than I had ever been, but it didn't do anything for me for coming up, and in some ways I felt even more unstable than I had before. So that didn't work for me. So then another thing was oh, you gotta make sure you're running, make sure you have you're moving, you're getting that cardiovascular thing. I was already playing college soccer. I was running 20 plus miles a week easy. And same thing, for me, I just always had this forward hunching posture, and putting more miles wasn't helping on that. Another thing I was told is a lot of people are told okay, you need to strengthen then. You need to get these muscles on your back nice and strong so you can stand up vertical and resist gravity. So at one point in my life, I was doing CrossFit, 4 times a week as well. So in some respects I got stronger. In some respects I was noticing my forward head posture in this interior thing was even worse than before. So I was really frustrated. Again, it's I've tried all these different things. I'm putting in all this effort, and my posture still sucks. What do I do here? And eventually came to this thing called functional patterns. So functional patterns is a system of movement that is designed to really reconnect your brain with your body and get you back to a good position on a consistent basis. So when I first heard of this, it's okay, it kind of sounds like everything else, you move and you get better. So I want to delve into some of the principles that I was really able to learn from functional patterns, because it's much different than anything else that anybody was talking about. Because the first thing that they really hit home that nobody else was talking about is that your body works with, you have your skeleton, and that alignment's important, but then you have muscles and fascia that are working together. I just shot a video on fascia. If you don't know what that is, go ahead and check that out so you can get the background information. But basically we have muscles that contract, and then we have these huge fascial sheaths, which are like gigantic strong rubber bands that allow for all this cool movement. And the best analogy I heard is like a lot of us have all these compensations and like densifications and tightenings. Like we get told it's like muscle knots and all that kind of stuff. It's usually not the muscle, it's usually the fascia that's coming together, but we do end up with these tight, dehydrated points that aren't moving like they're supposed to. So the best analogy I got is like, hey, if this is like your densification and you're trying to stretch and move around it, like your body moves around the densification, like that knot or that densification doesn't really do, like it stays where it's at. Like everything kind of moves around that. And I really strongly believe this is why I was having so many issues with yoga. I think I had like tons of compensations and densifications, and I was like doing all this stretching around it. So like these areas got really stretched out, but the areas that were a problem were still a problem. And again, like that instability, I was feeling like if these muscles get too stretched out, that can be an issue with stability further down the line. So I believe that's why yoga wasn't a good fit for me. Another thing that functional patterns really highlighted that I loved was this idea of compensatory patterns that we get built into. So again, we have like structural densifications that happen. I was talking a little bit about like the brain and the posture before. So neurologically, the more time we spend in a certain position, our brain and our bodies work hand in hand, and it really has a use it or lose it mentality. So your brain says, okay, buddy, if you're gonna sit like this all day and you're gonna be in front of a computer all day, I'm gonna get really good at that. So we literally develop these nerve highways that your brain is more efficiently able to hold you in this position without exerting so much effort. So you just kind of get to this baseline like, hey, I think this is where I exist. So I love functional patterns as well because they're really about retraining that neural connection between the brain and the body, where it's like, hey, that's not your default to just go to this crappy position. Because that's another frustration I hear all the time is like, well, I sit up straight for like a second while I'm thinking about it, and then 2 seconds later I'm like right back to the position that I'm always in. And it's because it is an automatic process of the brain. So it's all about resetting that neural circuitry that's going to your body so you can get that better output for yourself. So I absolutely love that. Along with that, they really understand that it's like you have 3 core pillars of your posture. The glutes is going to be one, the core is going to be another one, and then your thoracic spine is going to be the last important one. With that though, like most workout programs, it's like, okay, let's work your core. You're doing sit-ups. You might be doing planks, but everything is really one directional. Same thing with like the glutes, like, all right, let's do some squats. Like everything happens in this plane, and 90% of exercise that I see just happen like this. So this ties into the third part of functional patterns that I absolutely love, and this part like kind of blew my mind, but it's this idea that the human body is designed off of rotation. Like you watch any professional sports, like nobody's standing just flat-footed and like doing stuff in this plane. Like if you're a professional boxer and you're trying to punch people like this, like you'd be flat on your back in 2 seconds, right? Like everything happens with this big wind up and release forward, like boxing, like baseball, like everything's loaded and you're swinging through. Like we have these big rotational movements, and that's how our body generates powerful motions and like dynamic things that we see in professional sports. But even in something as simple as walking, like, and I never really understood this either, like even after going through chiropractic school and everything, is like your hips when they're walking are supposed to pivot like a figure 8 back and forth. Most of us are kind of clunking around like this. Like there's really no motion in these really key areas that there's supposed to be motion in. Same thing with the core. Like I always taught core was like 6-pack abs. The six-pack part of your core, it's called the rectus abdominis. It's actually like the smallest, weakest part of your core. So yeah, it looks good, but if you're only working out that, the whole thing ratchets down. It's designed to flex you in. So a lot of times the more you're working this out, the more you get flexed down, everything kind of pooches in, it ends up not looking good anyway. But we have these huge muscles, transverse abdominis, the obliques, like huge slings that work all over, like these cool crisscross patterns that allow for dynamic explosive movement. Nobody's ever talked to me about that either. So all this to say that functional patterns was one of the most important things that I had in terms of like, what can I do for my body movement and what activity can I exhibit to actually get to a better spot. So I still have work to do. I'm excited though, because I feel like the work that I'm doing is actually paying off. Whereas before I was putting in work, I'm like, I'm not seeing anything, or I actually feel like things are getting worse. And again, I don't think it's like that running's inherently bad or that yoga's inherently bad. I just think that if we have all these compensations going on, and for example, if you go for a run while you're like this, you're gonna work around your compensations, and it's gonna highlight and strengthen the compensations that are already there. And again, that's where things can really go downhill over a period of time or fairly quickly. So I really encourage you, if you haven't been talked to about these ideas before, Functional Patterns is really cool. You can just go to their website. They got a really cool 10-week at-home program. If you just like Google it or go on Instagram, there's a lot of individual functional patterns practitioners. If there's one in your area, that's awesome. You can work with them directly. A lot of them will also do virtual appointments if you're not living close to somebody who does that specifically. But again, it's a functional patterns practitioner. You can look that up or check out more on their website. So if nothing else, just understand that one, your body more than likely has densifications and compensations there that need to be worked out, like ball rolling, and there's some other things that you can do to open that up. Functional patterns gets into that. So number one, you want to open up your compensations before you're doing like a really dynamic workout problem where you're continuing to put like all these miles or reps on a body that's compensated. Two, you want to understand that you got those three pillars of posture. You got your glutes, your core, and your thoracic spine. They really need to be trained appropriately, and they need to be trained in this context of rotation. Because if you're just trying to work on these different things in this motion only, you're going to start to solidify and you're going to start to lock up some of those key pivotal joints that we need to have opened up. So again, I wanted to give you that overview because this really blew my mind. It changed things a ton for me. Make sure you make sure you check out the website if you're interested there. You can just learn some more about those basic principles. But if nothing else, get rotating, get moving more appropriately, open up those compensations. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to our videos here so you can keep in the loop about good information coming up. If you're dealing with migraines, if you're dealing with a long-term standing chronic condition, the structure is so key and it's never talked about, so please look more into this if you haven't already. It's going to bring back that energy, it's going to allow things to open up for you and start to make a move in your life. Good talking to you, I'll see you in future videos.